Say one more word, and I will strike you where you stand. Strike if you will, but hear me first.
The year is 480 BCE, and you are packed into the belly of a warship in the Strait of Salamis, with dawn only minutes away. This channel is barely wide enough for two ships to pass, and today it will decide everything. 370 Greek ships are jammed into a channel built for a fraction of that number. Beyond that horizon, wait more than double your number, the largest fleet ever assembled by one empire. The man who dragged you into this trap is standing at the front of the fleet, watching the horizon with you. Your city is already burning behind you, with no home left standing for your retreat. Even your own commander wanted to retreat before the battle started, and Themistocles talked him out of it. Xerxes I is watching from a golden throne on the hillside above you, certain he is about to watch you die. The sun clears the horizon, and somewhere close by, a horn is about to sound. Beside you stands a marine who has never been in a real battle before today, and neither have most of the men on the ship. You grip the oar, and you wait for the drum that tells you to pull. One single drumbeat controls every oar on this ship, and in a moment, it is about to start. In the next few hours, this narrow strip of water will decide whether Greece survives at all. A month earlier, 300 Spartans had bought Greece a few days at Thermopylae, and Xerxes I had marched through anyway, straight into an undefended Athens. He burned the city to the ground, exactly as he had promised every Greek city that dared to resist him. To Xerxes, Athens wasn't a victory worth celebrating. It was simply the empire behaving exactly as it always had. This empire stretched from Egypt to the edge of India, and in 3 generations, it had never once lost a war it truly wanted to win.
Their city burns. Their fleet will scatter within the week. Greece has already lost. They simply haven't noticed yet.
That night, the Themistocles sent a single man rowing quietly toward the enemy fleet with a message meant to look like betrayal. The message claimed the Greek fleet was falling apart from within, and that this single night was the only chance to trap it for good.
The Greek fleet is divided. The Athenians will flee at dawn. You can destroy them before they reach open water.
Xerxes I believed exactly what he wanted to believe, that the Greeks were already broken and only needed one push to fall apart completely. That same night, the Persian fleet moved into position to seal both ends of the strait before dawn, exactly as the message had suggested they should. A separate Egyptian squadron slipped around the island entirely to seal the western exit, closing the only other way out of the strait. A Greek scout spotted Persian ships sealing both ends of the strait just before sunrise, and the trap had already closed. Themistocles heard the same report and, for the first time all night, allowed himself to look pleased.
Now there is no retreat to argue about. Now we simply have to win. Have to win.
Themistocles had trapped his own allies inside the plan as thoroughly as he had trapped the Persians, and no one in that tent could argue with the results anymore. Even Eurybiades, who had wanted to retreat since the night before, went quiet and picked up his shield. The Strait of Salamis was barely more than a mile wide at its narrowest point, and that single fact was the entire Greek strategy. Inside open water, the Persian fleet's superior numbers could surround and crush anything they met. But inside this strait, those same numbers would simply crowd into each other. Themistocles had spent weeks arguing for this exact location, knowing a smaller fleet fighting in a bottleneck could beat a larger fleet fighting in open water.
Here. Their numbers stop mattering the moment they enter this gap.
This wasn't one navy. It was more than 20 rival Greek city-states, forced into a single fleet by the size of the threat bearing down on all of them. Every Greek trireme carried a bronze ram at the bow, built for exactly one purpose: tearing open the hull of anything in its path. Every captain in that circle knew this alliance had argued for weeks about whether to fight here at all, and now none of them had a choice left. 170 men rowed each of these ships, and every single one of them had trained for this exact kind of fighting for years. The horn sounded, and the entire Greek line surged forward into the strait at once. Greek rams tore into Persian hulls one after another, and the first ships to die were the ones still trying to enter the strait. Persian ships packed so tightly behind the front line that many never reached the fighting at all, crushed instead by their own reinforcements, pushing in from behind. Where ships collided and stuck together, the fighting stopped being naval at all. And turned into something closer to hand-to-hand combat on a sinking floor. Xerxes I watched from his golden throne as his own numbers turned into his own worst enemy.
Through the gap! They can't turn in here, so don't give them the room to try!
One Persian commander was actually a queen, Artemisia of Caria, and she alone kept her composure while the fleet around her fell apart. A Greek trireme had locked onto her ship specifically, closing fast enough that escape by open water was no longer possible. With a Greek ship closing fast behind her, Artemisia rammed straight through one of her own side's vessels, just to clear her escape route. From the distance of his throne, Xerxes I mistook her ramming a friendly ship for a brilliant strike against the enemy, and praised her for it.
Did you see that? My men become women, and my women become men.
Yes, O King of Kings.
By afternoon, the strait itself had become a floating graveyard, choked with broken hulls and drifting oars. Most Persian sailors had never learned to swim, and the water itself killed as many men that afternoon as any blades did. Some clung to brokens for hours before the cold or the currents finally finished what the battle had started. Greek hoplites landed on a small island where Xerxes had stationed marines to finish off shipwrecked Greek sailors and cut down every one of them instead. What remained of the Persian fleet finally broke and ran, and even the retreat killed ships that had survived the battle itself.
They're running. After all of that, they're actually running.
Xerxes rose from the throne he had built to watch his certain victory. And instead, he had watched his navy die. His first fear wasn't losing Greece. It was that the Greek fleet might sail north next and destroy the bridges holding his only way home. Xerxes dispersed the bulk of his army back toward Persia that same season, leaving only a fraction of his force behind to finish what he had started. The general left behind to finish the war had no idea he was also being left behind to lose it.
Finish it without me. I will not watch a second defeat from a hillside throne.
The following year, the remaining Persian force was destroyed at Plataea and Mycene, finishing what Salamis had started. Mardonius died on that field at Plataea, and with him died the last real chance the Persian Empire ever had of conquering Greece. The Greeks dedicated pieces of the captured Persian fleet at their temples, proof for anyone who doubted that the empire could actually be beaten. The Strait of Salamis is calm water today, crossed by ferries instead of warships. With barely a visible trace of what happened there. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe, because one lie sent across dark water in a rowing boat ended up deciding the fate of an entire civilization.